How's it everyone, this is Lolcohol, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing the Lightning Strike Raider featuring Omniscience. This build is probably one of the strongest builds I've ever played. I have invested a lot of currency into it, however I'm going to provide a budget version to this. But the thing with this build is it's so good that you're going to want to pour every last drop of currency you have into it. Starting off with the gear, I'm going to start off with Crystallised Omniscience because it's the most important part of the build and it's part of the reason why this build does such a disgusting amount of damage. So the way this works, modifiers to attributes instead apply to Omniscience. So strength, intelligence, dexterity, all attributes, these all instead give me Omniscience. And then per 10 points of Omniscience, I'm getting 1% all elemental resistances and 1% elemental penetration. Elemental penetration is really good, especially against targets with high resistances. That's where a lot of this damage is coming from. So if I have 10 strength, I instead get 10 omniscience, and then that 10 omniscience converts into 1% all res and 1% elemental penetration. And as you can see over here, I currently have 1,445 omniscience, which means I have 140% elemental penetration, which is disgusting. I managed to get this up to almost 2,000, and then I realized, what's the point? Do I really need to go that high? So I've slapped on a headhunter instead. But something important to note is that plus 10 to all attributes is the same as just plus 10 to strength. It's not plus 10 to strength, plus 10 to int, plus 10 to dex. So plus 10 all attributes is just going to give you 10 omniscience, not 30. Another thing that's very important about this amulet, the final line, attribute requirements can be satisfied by 15 to 25% of omniscience. When I first tried to get this working, I had a badly rolled one and it made it very hard to equip gear. So in my little shopping list that's included with all my build guides, I've included one that is well rolled. You can drop this number once you get higher and higher omniscience by stacking more and more attributes, but when you're starting out, it can feel like a bit of a puzzle trying to get omniscience to work and have all your gear equipped. So having this number higher makes it a lot easier. But that's Crystallized Omniscience, giving us tons of resistances and an absurd amount of elemental penetration, and that's why we're using it. Going over to our weapon, I would aim for very high flat elemental damage, so added lightning damage, added cold damage, added fire damage. I would prioritize lightning and cold to start off with, and then you can add in added fire. I do have elemental penetration on this, which is kind of, I mean, honestly, it's a bit of a waste. I'm getting so much elemental penetration elsewhere that I would way rather have that be tier 1 cold damage or something like that. And I'll explain why having lightning and cold is preferable, at least when you're starting out, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So weapon, just tons of elemental damage. Looking at the gloves, what is very important about these gloves, strike skills target one additional nearby enemy. You need this on your gloves. It's not very expensive to just get a base like this and then hit it with like an essence of greed to get some life. But this is very important for single target and also for clear. I try to run this without this implicit and it felt terrible. This adds a huge amount. Other than that, just going for things like spell suppression, life, attack speed, accuracy, and flat damage to attacks. These are all great, but the most important thing, strike skills target one additional nearby enemy. As for the rings, we're going for Mark of the Elder. This gives us a ton of increased attack damage, bit of max life, and then level 20 Tentacle Whip. So Tentacle Whip over here, it whips the enemy, causes 3 otherworldly tentacles to strike the ground around you, dealing your attack damage in an area. So that's a bit more damage, but also 77% increased attack damage if your other ring is a Shaper item, which is why I'm doing this. So on my other ring, I have a Shaper ring, and over here, I've just got tons of attributes. This is going to scale the Omniscience, like I explained. So here, strength, dexterity, intelligence, things like this are all good. And then the non-channeling skills have minus mana cost is very nice so that we can keep using our Lightning Strike without running out of mana. Then on top of that, increased elemental damage with attack skills is great. Life is great. And that's it for the rings. How about our shield? So shield, spell suppression, very nice. Chance to avoid elemental ailments. I would say these are probably the two most important suffixes because we are scaling a lot of Omniscience. Resistances aren't as important. However, when you are doing a budget version, you might not have incredibly high Omniscience, so you will probably still have to find some resistance on your gear. But spell suppression, elemental ailment avoidance are both great. And then armor during soul gain prevention, and this came from Turtle. Turtle actually helped me quite a lot with this build, so I'd like to say thank you to him. I'm also going to link his Twitch in the description, but big shout out to him. Armor during soul gain prevention. This is very nice because we're using Vaal Lightning Strike, and when this is on cooldown, just after you've used it and it can't gain souls, plus 3000 armor, yes please, that's really good. Helmet. Now, for a budget version of this helmet, you don't necessarily need a Blizzard Crown. However, Lightning Strike pierces 3 additional targets, very useful. And then on top of that, the modifiers you'll look for are just going to be life, and then attribute or accuracy rating. If you can get plus melee strike range as a benchcraft, I've got the unveiled version, that's why it's +2, but benchcraft melee strike range, and then I have a guide on how I made this helmet, so if you really want to make one just like this, check out that video. And by the way, haven't mentioned it, I do have a path of building with budget versions of all of this, so don't stress if you're looking at this thinking it's expensive. Boots, booties, Dark Ray Vectors, these are perfect for this build. It gives us an extra frenzy charge and movement speed per frenzy charge. You could go for Elusive Onslaught Tailwind boots, that would be fine, or even just Tailwind Onslaught boots. Those would be a perfect but much more expensive option. I haven't gone that route, I'll explain why later, but Dark Ray Vectors, perfect boots for the build. As for the belt, yeah, this build is really good with Headhunter. However, I only just started using Headhunter. Before that, I was using a Stygian Vise with life and a bit of resistances. I think I was a bit short at the time. So belt, same thing. Life, elemental damage with attacks, attributes, maybe resistances if you need it. All of those are great. And then you can check out the POB to see the kind of endgame synthesized base that I was using that had % attributes as an implicit. But belt, don't worry, you don't need a Headhunter. It's just that Headhunter is very nice on this build. Now talking about armor. This is a bit of a contentious topic. So, Farrell's Fur is a very popular choice. I can recommend it. However, I don't think it's as good as people think. With this build, you're generating power charges so quickly that Farrell's Fur really just does not seem necessary to me. However, if you are using it, that's absolutely fine. However, you could opt instead for something a bit more like this, something with a life and then flat attributes like dexterity and strength. If you are a player who doesn't know that spell suppression can also appear on like gloves and boots and stuff, then you could also get spell suppression on your chest. But other than that, just get attributes and then max life. And as for the implicits, these implicits are not the best, but implicits that would be really good on this would be something like anger, aura effect, and increased effect of non-curse auras. So you can either go for Farrell's, you could go for something like this, or you can go the option where you go for flat attributes and life. Again, I have all of this in my shopping list, so you can just click a button and be brought straight to the trade site. Going over the flasks, I just have an instant recovery, corrupted blood immunity life flask. We are going to be leeching a bunch, so you're not going to need this most of the time, but sometimes you will. On top of that, diamond flask, This is really nice. Increases our crit. You can get increased attack speed or maybe increased crit chance with this. And then as for the prefix on your flasks, I think the best one that I do not have on any of my flasks is gain charge when you deal a critical strike. And we're critting all the time, so that pretty much means your flasks are always full. However, gain charges when you're hit by an enemy, that's still fine. We're killing stuff so much that it's not really an issue except for bossing. When it comes to bossing, I would say it's absolutely worth your time rolling for gain a charge when you deal a critical strike. Next flask, Jade. Jade is really nice. This gives us more evasion, and on the suffix I have % increased armor. The reason this has % increased armor is because my granite flask has increased evasion, and it doesn't really matter if this has % armor or % evasion if you're using both and you have both of these mods at the same time. But yeah, we just want to get even more evasion, even more armor. As for the fourth flask, I'm actually using Bottled Faith. So if you can afford this, it's cool, it's really good, but it costs about 8-9x. However, if you want to go on a more budget version, you can use an Onslaught flask, Silver Flask, reduced effective curses, very nice. And then as for the last flask, it's our Granite Flask, just increased armor or evasion during flask effects. So when we hit this button, all of our defenses go up. Watch. Wow. Let's have a look at our main gem setup. I'm using Vaal Lightning Strike. This is our primary skill. It does this. It hits monsters and they die. But you can read over it. However, we're also using Vaal Lightning Strike. This is very, very good for bosses. So what it does is it kind of throws an orb on the ground, and that thing then does more lightning strikes at the boss. So that's more damage. Try and get yourself a Vaal Lightning Strike. It's not expensive. A 2020 Vaal Lightning Strike is, I think, 35 chaos. Well worth your time for the single target. Then over here, multi-strike. This just makes us hit faster. If I take it out, yep. All right. Some people say they prefer level 5 awakened lightning damage. That's fine. The reason I think some people prefer that is that multi-strike does not apply to your Vaal Lightning Strike. So the added lightning damage adds more to your single target. However, you do lose all of that attack speed. I haven't tested it. I'm not convinced by it, but yeah, you could maybe swap this out for added lightning damage if you want. It's going to, however, make the next gem a little bit trickier to balance. Well, we'll go over Trinity in a second, but let's just look at the rest. Nightblade. Nightblade's really good. It gives us a ton of crit, gives us some base crit, gives us increased effect of elusive, and it gives us a ton of crit multi. So this is a great choice. Then elemental damage with attacks. You don't need the awakened version. However, level 5 awakened elemental damage with attacks means that elemental damage cannot be reflected to us. So if you have this, you don't have to worry about reflect on maps. However, if you don't, then when you're rolling maps, just be careful, because LE Reflect will kill you instantly. Next, Inspiration. Inspiration, this gives us a lot of more elemental damage, and it also helps us reduce the cost of our Lightning Strike. Now, last but not least, Trinity. This is a very confusing gem, but the TLDR is, this gives us more elemental damage and more elemental penetration based on how much resonance of each element we have. So as we hit monsters, we gain resonance stacks for the 2 elements that dealt less damage than the highest hit. So that sounds confusing. Let's say we have lightning, fire, and cold damage. Our lightning damage hits for the highest. Let's say it hits for 10,000 and the other 2 hit for 3,000. We're going to gain resonance for cold and fire. So when our lightning damage hits for more, we're going to gain 25 resonance of the other elements per second for 2 seconds. And this is capped at 50 resonance. So the aim with Trinity is to have resonance for all 3 elements. And now how do we do this? How do we have it so that sometimes lightning is hitting for the most and sometimes cold is hitting for the most? Well, the best way to look at it is we want our lightning to have a very high maximum and a very low minimum. And that's kind of how lightning damage already works. If you look at my claw, it's 18 to 305, whereas my fire is 120 to 195. It's a very tight range. However, if you look at the cold, it says 2,209 to 3,457. So from this, you can see if I'm hitting 5, 6, 7 times a second, a lot of the time, that lightning damage, it's going to be on the upper side, and I'm going to be generating resonance for cold and fire. However, when that lightning rolls very low and my cold is higher, then I'm going to be generating resonance for lightning and fire. Hopefully that makes sense. We want our lightning damage minimum to be less than our cold damage minimum, but we want our lightning damage maximum to be more than our cold damage maximum. I'm going to link a video in the description where Nugi explains this. He explains it very well. It's a very confusing gem. Once you get your head around it, it does make sense, but the main thing we're trying to do is gain resonance for all 3 elements. I've also heard some people say that you just add the minimum and maximum of the different elemental types and see if they add up to the same amount, and then that's when you know that it's a good balance of resonance. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but maybe that's right. Anyway, that's it for Trinity. If you want to know more, go watch Nugi's video. Let's have a look at our auras. So we're using Determination. This gives us more armor, so we die less. Anger. This gives us more fire damage, so we hit harder. Herald Device. This makes things explode and gives us more cold damage to attacks, which means things die. And then we have Enlighten 3. You can use Enlighten 4. You don't have to use Enlighten. I'll explain how to get around this, but I'm using Enlighten 3. Also, Precision. Now, if you are struggling to reserve mana, make sure your Precision isn't too high level. This will really make you struggle to fit in the other auras. I'm also using Defiance Banner. This gives us increased armor and evasion, also reduces the crit chance of nearby enemies, and then that's it for auras. Over on our movement skills, I'm using Whirling Blades linked with Life Tap. This just means that I'm never not going to have enough mana to cast it, but then I've also linked Assassin's Mark with Mark on Hit, which is also linked to Life Tap. Now, this is a new skill, and it says trigger supported skill when you hit a rare or unique enemy with an attack. Something cool about this is it doesn't need to be linked to the skill that is dealing damage. So how do I explain? I don't need to use Whirling Blades to apply Mark on Hit. I can use my Lightning Strike and that'll apply the Assassin's Mark. So that's why I have this setup. And it's also linked with Life Tap because otherwise I would just never have mana. It does still use the mana cost of the Assassin's Mark. So that's why that's linked with Life Tap. Then let's have a look at some of our single target. I've got Ancestral War Chief. Don't worry about the Vaal. That I never use it. This is mainly used for single target. So when you get to a boss, you drop your Ancestral War Chief. Gives you more melee damage. And then you can also drop an Ancestral Protector, which gives us more attack speed. Also, these things hit pretty hard. You can see they do some damage themselves. So you get to the boss, you drop these, and they hit the boss and make you also hit the boss faster. You got to link this with multiple totems so you can have +2 maximum summon totems. And then the last thing, some people would recommend Culling Strike. I'm using faster attacks. I'll explain why, but Culling Strike is a good option instead of faster attacks. And then looking at some of our utilities, I have a Withering Step. You place this on your left click. That way it just continually recasts as you move. Withering Step grants us Elusive. And then Blood Rage gives us increased attack damage and Leech and even more chance to gain Frenzy charges on kill. And then Molten Shell. This I'm just self-casting. I'm not doing any kind of cast and damage shenanigans. Just got on my queue when I get scared. Push that button. It's also really strong with this craft. So if I get to a boss, I drop my Vaal Lightning Strikes, and then I'm on Soul Gain Prevention. I get 3,000 armor. Then I push my Molten Shell. I'm getting a lot more. But that is it for the gems. Let's have a look at the skill tree. So, main things I'm going for: life, crit, elemental damage, and mana reservation, and then some other stuff. But let's go through it kind of as you would level it. So here, going for projectile speed and projectile damage, life, and then down here, attack speed, accuracy, and crit chance for attacks and elemental damage with attacks. Now, this is very important. We're going for reservation over here, charisma, and then we're selecting the mana reservation efficiency of skills. This is just to help squeeze in more auras. Over here, grabbing some more life. Over here, another jewel socket. I'll go over this forbidden flesh in a second. But then moving up this way, we are getting for the shadows. Now you're probably thinking, this is daggers. Why are we doing this? Oh wait, increase elusive effect. That's really good. And then also dagger mastery. Critical strikes have culling strike. This is why I'm not using it in my ancestral war chief setup. You can instead go elusive grants 40% crit multi to skills supported by Nightblade. However, I prefer this. I think it's better. Turtle gave me that idea and I agree with it. Now over here, Clever Thief, very important for life and mana sustain. So that's a great option. Definitely worth the 2 points. More life over here, more crit, more accuracy, and we're grabbing the Precision Reservation Mastery. Now over here, grabbing some more Frenzy charges, grabbing a Power charge, and then this is optional. This is just a bit of Chaos Res. It's 4 points for about 40% Chaos Res. Up to you if you want this. If you want to go full softcore, put these 4 points somewhere that give you more damage. But then over here we've got Claws of the Magpie. This is just more damage. And then Claws of the Hawk, more crit chance with Claws, more crit multi with Claws. And then as for the mastery, skills supported by Nightblade have 40% increased effective elusive. That's really strong. I will go over all the jewels in a sec, but let's just have a look at more of the tree. So over here, grabbing another Frenzy Charge, grabbing more crit multi, grabbing more accuracy and attack speed, and then a bit more life. And then down here, lethality. Projectile attack skills have crit chance and crit multi. By the way, didn't explain it, probably should have, but this is a melee attack, but it fires projectiles. So we're benefiting from both that and melee. So over here, grabbed Utmost Swiftness, tons of attributes, lots of attributes, and then the mastery is 5 strength per allocated mastery skill. And I think we've got about 9 masteries, so it's 45-ish strength. Over here, more life and ailment avoidance, and we're grabbing the flat life mastery. And then down over here, more frenzy charges, cool. And then here, grabbing Disciple of the Slaughter, minimum frenzy charges, and then increased damage per frenzy charges. And because we have 8 frenzy charges, that's 8 times 8, 64. Very, very strong. And then we're grabbing the increased damage per endurance frenzy or power charge. Over here, grabbing more life and grabbing the 10% max life mastery. And then over here, Rampart. We're piling all the way here so we can get some Fortify on melee hit. And we get that by selecting Fortify Mastery. Melee hits Fortify. Fortify makes us die less. That's why we take it. It's good. Now, if you are struggling to fit in all your auras, if you don't maybe have an Enlightened 3 yet, what you can do is grab these 3 points and then select the Determination has 25% increased mana reservation efficiency. It's 4 points, but it might really help you out while you are trying to get your Enlighten. Also, I've stuck in Thread of Hope. You can then grab Panopticon instead of anointing it, and then grab Mana Flows and Art of the Gladiator. This is more dex, ignore movement penalties from armor and attack speed and global accuracy. This gives us more intelligence and max mana and mana regen. However, I think Master of the Arena is really good instead of this until you get melee strike range on your helmet or something like that. I think I should take that instead of this. Ignore that. Take this. Master of the Arena. It's really good. Okay. Let's go over some of the jewels. Forbidden Flesh. So if you have this and this, the two halves, these allocate Gathering Winds. So as you can see, Gathering Winds, this is a Deadeye Ascendancy. Gain 1 Gale Force when you use a skill. 15% increase of Tailwind on you per Gale Force, and you and nearby enemies have Tailwind. Tailwind is really strong. It increases your action speed, so more attack speed, more movement speed, all of that. These now go for, I think it's about 20x for the red one and 4 for the blue one. I haven't checked in a while, but the prices were dropping a lot. I paid almost 40x for mine, but they're much cheaper now. These are great, and that's also why I'm not using Tailwind boots. Also, Lethal Pride. This is great. You can see over here I'm getting 4% max life, 5% increased strength, more Omniscience, 5% increased strength, more Omniscience, and then melee damage and 5% increased strength. These are all good. Percent strength, flat strength, life, and then Intimidate. Those are all very, very, very good ones to get on your Lethal Pride. You can buy these for about 10 chaos each, and then you can either divine it and then stick it in your tree and see what changes, or you can just buy a new one and see what it does on your tree. I've also got an intuitive leap setup. Don't have to use this, but it certainly saves me some points. This lets us allocate passives without them being connected to the tree. So I've selected Heartseeker, don't need to waste these 2 points. Got my Frenzy, don't need to waste that point. Got this, don't need to waste these 2 points, even though I wasted 1. But this is optional. However, I really like this setup, so that's why I'm doing it like that. Let's quickly go over the Ascendancy. So, Way of the Poacher. This gives us a chance to gain a Frenzy Charge and kill. So this is another reason why I think Farrell's is a bit overrated. And we gain Frenzy when we hit a rare or unique enemy. Also gives us max Frenzy Charges. And then Avatar of the Slaughter. This is why we're stacking Frenzy Charges. Gives us increased evasion, movement speed, attack speed, and attack damage per Frenzy Charge. And we have about 8. So multiply those numbers by 8. That's why this is good. Adds a lot of speed and attack damage. Over here, Quartz Infusion, 40% chance to suppress spell damage. This really helps with us capping out our spell suppression. By the way, if you are struggling to cap your spell suppression because it's not on your gear, you can take Entrench, these 2 nodes, and then the Mastery, 10% chance to suppress spell damage if your boots, helmet, and gloves have evasion. That's 1, 2, 3 points, and it's 24% suppression. But you should be able to cap it out with your gear and with Quartz Infusion. And then over here, Avatar of the Vaal, 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments while phasing, and we're always phasing because of this. And then nearby enemies have fire, cold, and lightning exposure while you have phasing, which is again always applying -20 to those resistances. So on top of all the penetration we're doing, we're also doing a lot of exposure, so all enemies are fully exposed to our penetration. I do want to go over a couple of very, very important things. One thing with Lightning Strike, you must have always attack without moving on this. I normally have this on for all of my skills, on all of my builds, but for this one especially, if you don't have this on, this build's going to feel awful. You're going to like run up to a monster and only when you reach the cursor is it going to attack like this. I'm right clicking like here and I'm just running. If I put this on, I'm just attacking without moving. I have that on for everything. Very, very important. Another important thing to explain in terms of gameplay with this build is single target. Now, you don't want to be standing right on top of the boss because you're going to be missing out on this strike skills, target an additional nearby enemy. So over here, if I just do a hit right on top of him, there's this beam that comes out of the sky. If I'm right on top of him, there's only one beam. But if I stand a bit off to the side, you can see there's that second beam. You see that second beam? Yeah, you don't get that if you're standing right on top of the boss. So there's kind of a sweet spot with this build in terms of getting that. When it comes to bossing, don't stand right on top of the boss. Try get those 2 beams to appear. Again, I'm going to link a video from Nugi where he explains this more in depth. But if you're struggling with single target, try find that little sweet spot where you're hitting the target twice. Before we go, let's just talk about leveling quickly. So because this is more of an endgame build that kind of requires at least a few X of investment to get started, it's about 12, 13, 14, 15X to get like a decent version going. I did not level this as Lightning Strike itself, and so therefore I can't really tell you if this is fine to level as Lightning Strike. My guess is it's probably okay if you're constantly upgrading your weapons. However, if you're a newer player, it might get a bit frustrating. I personally leveled this with Toxic Rain. I slapped on some 7 League Steps and a Tabby and a Quill Rain and made it to maps in about 3.5 hours. However, I'm going to link in the description a guide from Kobeblackmamba where he explains how to level a Hollow Palm Smite build. This might seem intimidating if you're a new player and you are used to leveling the skill that you're going to be playing in the endgame, but I promise you it's very well worth your time learning a leveling build so you can get to maps much more quickly. But that is gonna be it for this video. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. I've included the path of building pastebin as well as the shopping list. I've also got links to crafting a bunch of pieces of gear that you can find on this build. I've got links to Nugi's nerding out on Trinity and Vaal Lightning Strike single target. So just check the description for everything. I know this was a very long video, but I wanted to be thorough with it. Also, once again, big thank you to Turtle for helping out with this. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and have fun with Lightning Strike. Bye-bye.